Welcome to episode 3 of Who Gives a Vote. And we now have a regular co-host. Satira, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thanks for inviting me back.
It is lovely to have a female presence. As I said last week, it's great to have you here. And, you are a bit of a political, what did you call yourself?
Tragic.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't say it.
It's okay.
But you've been involved in a few different campaigns and things like that before. So to have you on board is awesome. Just wanted to check in with you. What did you get up to last night?
Look, I had a pretty slow evening last night. I had to pick up my son from work, then drop another son off to the gym with his friends and pick my husband Andrew up from a mate's place. So by the time all of that finished, I was tired and in bed.
Yeah. I've got my girls for the weekend, so it was peanut M&Ms on the bed, watching YouTube clips with them. That was my life. But you know what? Someone here has a way more exciting life. Yeah, you're looking at him right now. This guy, partying hard. Yep. You can smell it on him. He smells like progressive ideology mixed with a hint of mum wine and a splash of lady marmalade.
Did you go to a point of order workshop?
No, if it's what I think it is, Macca is trying to make fun of my musical tastes. Is that fair to say, Macca?
Yes, he went and saw Pink.
Well, no. I haven't gone and seen Pink.
What?
I'm going to see Pink. As soon as we finish here, I'm jumping in my car. I'm driving to Brisbane. I'm getting on my Pink gear and I'm going to dance the night away with Pink at the Suncorp Stadium.
I thought you were there last night.
No, absolutely not. Do you think I'd be able to speak today if I was at Pink? Come on now.
When Stu first told me about Pink, he's like, oh, there's a Pink concert. I said to him, Stu, is marriage really that important to you? Like, you're being dragged
Are you going
there.
on your own? Is Dana not going with you?
No, Dana is not going with me.
You're kidding me. See, this is, okay, we got to get to the bottom of this. This is the big political thing at the moment, okay? This is the hot topic. Yeah, hit him.
Why is Dana not going with you? She got better musical taste than you, obviously, but why?
To be fair, Dana loves Pink and she would be going if there was a ticket, but there's not. Sorry, Dana. So the ticket became available about a week ago. It's my son, or my adopted son, Dylan. He had a spare ticket and he asked me to come with his mum and his mum's friend. And I entertained the idea of offering the ticket to my daughter, Jazara, but I like Pink more than Jazara does, so I'm going. I've always wanted to go to Pink. I think she is brilliant, despite what you think, Macca. I can like Iron Maiden, Metallica, Pearl Jam, Hamilton, Elvis Presley, and Pink. It's possible. It is possible, and it's okay. If you are a Pink fan, be brave. You don't have to be a Taylor Swift fan. You can be a Pink fan. I'm a Pink fan.
Okay, so we had a news report from a Sydney show. Apparently more tramp stamps seen in a reality TV show reunion.
I'm looking forward to engaging with a diverse community.
Stewie, enjoy.
I will, and I'm not going to be Pink shamed. Absolutely not. It's an outrage.
Not this election. He will not be Pink shamed.
That's right. It's okay. It's okay. So I'm still a rock star. I got my rock moves. Yeah. You with me?
Yeah,
No, sing along?
Any opportunity to sing.
Enough about what Stewie's into, even if it might be weird. Satira, let's talk about the candidates that have nominated.
Okay, and these are the names listed as they will appear on the ballot. So for Mayor, Grant Reynolds, George Seymour. Division 1, Michelle Byrne, Darcy Wayne and James Hansen. Division 2, Giselle O'Keefe, and number 2, Phil Truscott. Division 3, Paul Truscott has been elected without contest. Congratulations, Paul.
Just on that one, quickly, I didn't quite get this the other day. I had to get Stuart to explain it to me. So if nobody runs against them, after the 16th, they were straight in.
Yeah, and particularly because he's a councillor already, he will just continue on. He will be, I believe, sworn into the new council, as all councillors will. But for all intents and purposes, he is no longer involved in the campaign. We will actually speak to Paul Truscott next week.
Okay.
We're going to Maryborough next week, and you're pretty keen to get out there and see the Maryborough signage.
Shout out to Wuku.
Shout out to Wuku. So we'll be speaking to him and talking to him about what he would obviously be delighted about, the fact that he's actually now not in a non-contested seat.
Yeah. Division 4, Daniel Sanderson and Daniel Beattie. Division 5, Michelle Govers, Oscar Suarez. Division 6, we have Lachlan Cosgrove, Catherine Forgan Flynn, Robert Garland, Chris Mitzi, Chris Pearce, Alicia Ann Wade. Division 7, John Wayland, Andrew Broad, Jan Heggie, Lisa Meadows. Division 8, Dennis Chapman, Phoenix Baker. Division 9, Sarah Farage and Greg Watts. Division 10, Rolf Light, Zane O'Keefe and Luke Strocknetter.
So, Satira, last week we talked about the fact that you had to be an independent in every other local government area other than Brisbane. That legislation's actually old legislation now, isn't it? There's new legislation that says you can, and we actually do have somebody.
That's right, Stuart. I did have that wrong last week, so apologies for leading people down the garden path. Section 27 of the Local Government Electoral Act, subsection 1, states that a person who wishes to be a candidate in an election may only be nominated by A, a registered officer of a registered political party that has endorsed the person as a candidate for election, or at least 6 electors of the local government area or division of the local government area for which the election is to be held. Now, everybody that has nominated has been nominated by 6 electors that live in the local government area, with exception of Lisa Meadows, who has been endorsed by the Animal Justice Party.
Animal Justice Party.
Yeah. So I'm not too sure if people remember the Animal Justice Party. A few years back, there was a gentleman in the Victorian Parliament, Andy Meddick, who was closely aligned with some of the outrageous things that Dan Andrews government was proposing, and so that's how I know about the Animal Justice Party. I don't think they have much of a presence here in Queensland. That'd be a very, very minor party.
Wow, how true was she that she is a political tragic?
She knew that. Yeah, I thought the Animal Justice Party was a part of the Marvel universe. Turns out it's not.
No.
That would make more sense, and it would be a much more interesting election if it were, but yeah, we'll see.
So, Stuart, how does that work with people endorsing you? If you're backed by a party or, like, say, even like a large organisation, like a private company, can you have as much money given to you as they want to give you?
There are certain rules around disclosure and what money you can receive, and you can't receive money from, say, developers, for example, and you can't. There are certain responsibilities. So every candidate, whether you're part of a political party or you're independent, you're required to declare where you're getting your money from in real time, and you're also required to declare your expenditure. It doesn't matter whether you're part of a political party or an independent on how much money you spend. There is no floor and there's no ceiling.
So I think it's really important we let the public know that their information is publicly available on the ECQ website. So what have you found in your investigating on the web?
Well, if you go to the ECQ website, and it is a little bit clumsy because you've got to pay attention to some of the tabs, but if you go to the ECQ website, you'll find a link to donations, and then up the top of that you've got to click on expenditure table, and it comes up, and then you can search for a person. For example, we've searched up on here Fraser Coast Regional Council for the 2024 local government elections, and we've applied those fields, and it just provides it's not a total amount, it's actually for every single thing that's been purchased. So on the 14th of February, for example, the Mayor did some election material printing, and that's George Seymour, and it cost him $31.46. So it actually goes into some detail. It used to be, Satira, that you had to do your disclosures after the election. I think it was 2016 in that election where they started the process of declaring it within a certain period, and now you have a portal that the candidates have to log on to, and it is uploaded real time for people to see if they wish to go through it. Whether or not you want to go through and see that the Mayor has bought, spent money on printing, some timber stakes and washers, some screws, some drills, a phone and calls and data plan, council nomination fee and shirts that were purchased from previous election and unused will be used with no new expenditure.
I think it's a really great idea. It's there's a lot of transparency there. People are declaring it's the same. Everybody has to do the same thing. There's nothing hidden.
Disclosures.ecq.qld.gov.au/expenditures. It is a little bit difficult to find, as was just pointed out by Stuart, but it is interesting to see. I know as a busybody, you and I are like, ooh, he bought a drill?
Intriguing. A drill.
My question is what drill? Because it says a lot about a person if you're a Makita guy, if you're a...
Well, yeah, there'll be tradies that'll judge him on that. Satira, last week, some harsh words were spoken by Stuart, and this week he's going to have to face the music because we do have the CEO from the council coming in to join us.
Yeah, that's right, Macca. That relates to Section 150 of the Local Government Act, which states that a councillor has a prescribed conflict of interest in a matter if the matter relates to an application or permit made. So it's directly related to Chris Pearce's position on the 21-storey building.
And I'm assuming it's probably something to do with the fact that I may have used the words it's bureaucratic overreach. I think that's probably the
What about
issue.
bucket of pus?
No, I don't think let's find out, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to be the issue because I don't think anyone would disagree that it's a bucket of pus. But as the great artist Pink once said,
oh, here we go.
Made a wrong choice once or twice.
Ken Dean, let's cut.
Got my way out of blood and fire.
Well, it was a fiery one last week when we started talking about certain things. And in response to Stuart's comments, we have Ken Dean, our CEO from the council. Hello, thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Now, Stuart, let's go to the video.
So has Chris been informed?
Yeah, well, and that's another. It's another, I guess, a little bit of colour in this election. Is as I understand, he got a letter from the CEO advising him that if he were elected, he'd be prohibited on voting on this because of he's got a prescribed conflict. Now, if you were to ask me, we talk about council overreach, and I don't mean to be critical of the CEO, but I don't think it's appropriate that a CEO write a letter to a candidate advising him on a perceived conflict that could occur afterwards for two reasons. One, because Chris could go and get his own legal advice if he got elected and pursue and fight this. And also, what the CEO has effectively done is interpreted legislation in the anticipation of a result at an election, which I don't think he should do either.
Ken, is Stuart accurate in what he said?
I think Stuart is accurate if that's based on what he understood, but what he understood was incorrect. So the only time I've written to councillor candidates is once, and I've written to all candidates, and in that letter I've congratulated them for running for council. I've also made them aware of their obligations with regards to election signage. I've talked to them about the heavy commitment for training when they first start and the need to free up their diary, and I've provided them with contact details should they need further information. So I haven't, in an unsolicited way, sent letters to candidates telling them what they can and can't say in the election process. However, I have responded to inquiries. So I've had many councillor candidates reach out to me either by the phone or by email, asking me for advice or interpretation of legislation or querying an aspect that relates to the council. And I think it's my duty and obligation as CEO to be able to respond to those.
Stuart, do you think that accurately answers it for you?
Yeah, look, I think firstly, thank you for coming on and thank you for calling me. I think we have a good enough relationship for you to be able to feel free to talk to me. And the fact that you're coming on here is an indication to me that you trust this process, and we are truly trying to engage our community. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. And as I say to candidates, my role as CEO is not to help. I'm not to help or hinder them in the election process. But if they require information in relation to the way local government works or our council, then I need to supply that information, provided that information is publicly available and not confidential information. And I do that. And over the last few weeks, I've had probably 8 or 9 councillor candidates make contact with me to get clarification on certain matters or to understand what the council's position is with respect to certain matters. And I'll continue to do that because I think that's my role and responsibility.
So I guess the 2 points that I made, one, if you did without solicitation, contact the candidate and provide, legal advice. That to me, and you're saying that that would be a fair assumption if that were the case, but you're saying that's not exactly how it was played out.
No, I've been contacted by a number of councillor candidates about what my understanding is with regards to conflict of interest, and I've provided my interpretation of the legislation, and I've also sought legal advice in terms of what the conflict of interest provisions are with respect to making submissions or expressing opinion, and I've shared that with any councillor candidate that has inquired to me about what the circumstances are.
Yeah, and I guess from my perspective, and I think this is important because some people may not understand the distinction. If I see an issue that I want to make comment on, I'll comment on the issue without disparaging the individual. I actually think you have incredible integrity and you're doing an incredible job as a CEO. And I want to make it clear that my comment was specifically around an issue relating to prescribed conflicts and the legal advice and the connecting with candidates.
Yeah, look, and I think your comment was fair based on your understanding, and I don't see it as my role to provide unsolicited advice to councillor candidates about what they can and can't do during an election process. The approach that I'm taking, the approach that my administration is taking, is to stay as far removed from the election process as possible to ensure that we can't be accused of trying to influence outcomes or perverting the democratic process.
Do you think it's a fair thing to say that prescribed conflicts under the Local Government Act are very hard for a candidate to understand, or a councillor, or dare I say a CEO, because you would have to go and get legal advice, and the legal advice might be contrary if you were to seek two separate legal advice. There's a lot to that, isn't there? And they are trying to fix every problem and plug every hole. And I don't know if legislation can do that. Do you have a view on that, or can you talk about it?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. I've been in local government now for about 38 years, and I think it's much, much harder for a councillor or a councillor candidate even to stay out of trouble under the current provisions under the Local Government Act. They are very prescriptive, and it's very easy to run foul of the provisions of the Local Government Act without really understanding that you are. Some of the provisions are difficult to understand. It's difficult to understand the intent of the provisions, particularly when it comes to prescribed conflicts and declarable conflicts of interest. So, so my advice to councillors and even to councillor candidates, if you are concerned about a position and the application of the legislation, I'm comfortable to provide that advice if you reach out to me. But I'm certainly not going to reach out in an unsolicited way to councillors or councillor candidates and provide them advice with regards to what they can and can't do, or what they can and can't say.
So what we're referring to here is Section 150 of the Local Government Act. So Ken, off this, we've had a candidate basically quite upset about this 21-storey building proposal. That's what we're getting to. That's the issue. And they have submitted in writing their disagreement with this. And that has obviously caused the problems because this candidate can't vote on the issue when it goes to council. So could somebody be vocal about it and not put it on paper? Would that be okay?
Yeah, so councillors and councillor candidates are entitled to express an opinion or a view. Where they could run into trouble is it depends upon the veracity in the way that they express it, and particularly if they express a view that talks to how they're going to exercise their duties and responsibilities as a councillor. The Local Government Act, the Code of Conduct, the standing orders all require councillors to act in an impartial and unbiased way and to make informed decisions. And this section of the Act, in my mind, is akin to preventing councillors from making comments or making submissions in the same way that you wouldn't want a judge to make their decision known on a court case before they even considered before the court case had been conducted. and that evidence and witness statements have been provided. And I think that's what that particular provision relates to in terms of prescribed conflict. In terms of a declarable conflict, councillors can make whatever comments they make. They should always preface it saying, in my opinion, so that the community knows it's not a council position. Councillor candidates can make comments, whatever comments express their opinions. But if they express an opinion to the extent that they are indicating how they'll exercise their duties, that could become a conflict of interest, a declarable conflict of interest. And I'm not the person that determines if it's a conflict of interest. It's their colleagues and peers around the council table that make the decision, not the CEO.
How do we know where that line is? Obviously, putting something in writing was too far, but how do we know that it's too far if somebody just verbalises something?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the facts and circumstances of each case. I don't think there is a hard and fast rule, and this is the problem. It's a grey area. You know, if you express your dissatisfaction in relation to 21-story on the Esplanade, I don't think that's an issue. I think you can express an opinion. But if you express an opinion that said, over my dead body will I ever approve?
Okay.
Well, then you're going to the heart of in my mind, you're demonstrating that you're not impartial, that you're not unbiased, and that have already determined your position before you have received all the evidence and information that will be provided to you when the matter becomes before council. Now, that doesn't say that it is definitely a conflict of interest. I think it then becomes a matter for councillors around the council table to determine if it's a conflict of interest.
Okay, so some of these people that are up for election that have put their names down might not have ever had any dealings with working for local government before. How do they know about these rules? Like, because you know what I mean? It is a grey area, right?
It is really difficult. And for anyone that's becoming a councillor candidate, and as I said, I've been in local government 38 years. Stuart's been a councillor, and the law is very complex. And if you've not had exposure to that, you can inadvertently say or do something that will bring you in conflict with the law. If you want to become a councillor, I think that all that's required, apart from being on the lecture roll and not a bankrupt, is that you have to complete So I Want to Be a Councillor course, which I think goes for about an hour and a half.
And you can only cover so much in that, right?
You can only cover so much in an hour and a half. And I think the conflict of interest provisions under the Local Government Act are the ones that catch up most councillors, not because they've done anything wrong, but they've done or said something without having an understanding of what the Local Government Act requires them to do.
Stuart, did you know as much as you should have known when you ran?
When I first came into council in 2012, it wasn't a prescribed conflict. It was a perceived conflict or a real conflict, and the legislation was less. If you look at the legislation in 150, and I say 150 because it's 150A, 150B, 150BC, 150C, there are so many parts of it now where some parts of it you can decide yourself. Other parts, the council chamber can make a determination, and others, being the prescribed conflict, even the council chamber can't decide for you. It's legislated, and if you were to stay in and if you were to vote, you would be potentially charged with a misconduct offence. So, yeah, absolutely. In the desire to create a document that addresses every single perceived issue, I think they've created a situation that castrates the democratic voice.
And I agree. It is a minefield for councillors. It's a minefield for candidates, and one wrong step could lead to catastrophic results for an individual.
Ken, you mentioned earlier that the number one query that you get from candidates is about election signage. Can you give us any information on what advice you provide back to them?
The advice that I've given to councillors and councillor candidates is to comply with the fact sheet. And we've updated our fact sheet online to make it simpler and easier to understand. We've asked them to distribute that fact sheet to their helpers that are typically the ones that put out the signs. And I've instructed my staff not to actively enforce election signage. But where someone makes a complaint, we will fully investigate it. And with regards to signage, if we identify signage that is a safety issue or impedes traffic flow or pedestrian flow, then we will confiscate it as well. We've confiscated around 60 signs, and in the last few weeks, I've been accused of stealing signs. I've been accused of perverting the democratic process. I've been accused of trying to influence election outcome. I've been threatened to be sued, and I've had candidates demand compensation for the confiscation of their signs. As I said, we'll take a light-handed approach, and we won't be actively enforcing it. But if people do make complaints, then we will enforce it.
And no one is safe from this, because our own mayor, our current mayor, he had his signs taken as well.
Yeah, I confiscated 4 of the mayor's signs, and the mayor, to his credit, has done an audit on all of his signs to make sure that they're all fully compliant.
When it comes to the signs, though, how do people get their signs back if they've had them taken?
So when we confiscate a sign, we do a number of things. We take a photo of the sign, we record the geographic location of the sign and the reasons why we've confiscated the sign, because candidates tend to get a little bit hot under the collar when we take their signs away. And I can understand that, because there's a lot of time involved in putting out signs.
And money.
Cost, yeah. So we record that on a register, and those signs are typically deposited in the council chambers by 12 p.m. the next day, and candidates are able to come and collect those at no charge.
Okay. So, Ken, we've covered the topic of people putting their signs in the wrong places. You have said that the council are going light on this. You have instructed the guys not to go super hard, because it does annoy people when you remove these signs. We've seen some good coverage. I know you can't pick favourites. We're not doing that game. But are there any signs that you've seen you've gone, wow, that person is out and about?
I make sure I don't look at signs.
Right.
As I said, my role as CEO is to be Switzerland.
Okay.
I've no political affiliations, and I'm more than happy to work with anyone that's voted into council. So I won't make any comment on who I think may or may not get in or their signage.
Okay. Can I on that note, because you did raise, and Mackie, you talked about the fact that it upsets candidates as being one of the reasons why council may be going light, but there's more to that, because at the moment, currently, council staff, particularly outdoor staff, are working incredibly hard. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of grass to be mowed. There's a lot of compliance. There's a lot of issues with dogs. If you take your staff and redeploy them to monitoring signs for 8 weeks, what impact does that have on council delivery?
Absolutely. Our priority is always going to be public health and safety. I'm not hearing from the public that signage is a major issue for them, and we know it is going to go away. If I put staff and resources onto actively enforcing election signage, that would be a big drain of resources. It means I'm taking our rangers away from their day-to-day job in terms of animal management, dealing with dangerous dogs, all those things which in my mind are much, much more important in terms of public health and safety. If a sign is reported, we'll investigate it, but it'll be triaged with all the other complaints that we receive, and it will be given the appropriate level of response. We typically do get to them within a day, but we don't go out and actively enforce. And if there is a dog attack or a dangerous dog at large, I'm certainly not going to divert those resources to taking down election signage.
Okay, let's talk signage. I did a bit of a drive from Burham Heads through to Harvey Bay, and that was on Thursday. It was a bit of a rainy day on Thursday when I went up there. I didn't see a lot in Burham Heads. We had Darcy Wayne, Michelle Byrne. They had decent coverage, but it wasn't a lot, and that might be due to restrictions as well and all those sorts of things. But they were the most noticeable up there. They were really the only 2 people that I saw in that area. In Tooga, Michelle Govers was really one of the only ones I could see. Dundarren, we saw some of Oscar Suarez around there. Smaller signs he's got. There's a really big billboard that Michelle Govers had as well. up there. So obviously put a fair bit into her campaign that she's doing there. When we were entering Hervey Bay, which I think is almost like a prime position there near the golf course and the roundabout, we saw a lot of the candidates from around town: Robert Garland, Chris Mizzy, Alicia Wade, Catherine Forgan-Flynn, Lachlan Cosgrove, Chris Pearce. I think that's a really good spot for candidates and seems to be all legal and checked over with everybody. On Boat Harbour Drive, Sarah Farage, she's playing a big game. She's got a big sign on the caravan park and also up and down there as well. Greg Watts has got a good showing down near Banksia Park Drive and up around Boat Harbour Drive. In Urangan, Ralph Light and Zane O'Keefe, they are just going for it really hard. And also Luke Stocknetter, he is doing really, really well. He's got a lot of signs up. Jan Heggie has a few out. The Springs has a bit of a showing there from Dennis Chapman and Phoenix Baker. Also around Kawungan, those guys are going pretty hard along there. Because, I mean, that's a great strip that you want as well, isn't it? Main Street. That's a really good one. As for Maryborough, I'll get to Maryborough next week. Don't worry, I'm coming for you. Look, we've seen some people obviously really get into the signage thing. And I was saying the other week, heads on sticks. And, you know, it doesn't mean a lot to me. I would like to see more from people personally. I'd like to see them out and about. And I'd also like to see more stuff online, because that's obviously where a lot of us live these days, is online. So I would like to see more of the stuff from the candidates. But a name and a face is handy when you are voting. So getting that signage out there. And I know, look, not everybody has the same budget too, because that's a big thing, Stu, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly it is. And we talk about resource. If you're a councillor, you've probably got that name, face recognition, and you don't necessarily have to put a lot of signage out. In some cases, too much signage will work in your detriment. So you've got to find that happy medium. Most candidates, when they're running, I think and say, for example, Division 6, you might get away with 60 to 80 signs. In Division 8, bigger space, you're probably looking at more. And then Division 1, which is the Fraser Coast Regional Council local government areas, that's the biggest geographical area. You're going to need a lot of signs, and that's probably why you're not seeing so many signs concentrated, because they've got to be spread out an incredibly large area within the division, and sometimes without as well. So I think absolutely signage is key. It's got to be a good photo. It's got to have the name on the top. And Ken, I don't know what you think, but are you an advocate for 5 mil call flute or 3 mil? Because I believe that 5 mil, you have to have 5 mil. It looks sharper.
I wouldn't have a clue.
He's a 5 mil guy. That's what he's saying.
I probably would be
He's
a
saying he's
5 mil
guy.
because I want to be durable. I'd want to be around for the next term as a councillor. So I'd be looking for not just this term, but the following term. So I probably would go 5 mil.
2 sticks or 1, mate?
I'd go 2.
Yeah.
I'm a bit OCD.
So Mac, you did mention that the signs up near the golf course were all compliant. I'm going to give Ken a quiz here and ask him to tell me which of these signs is compliant and which ones aren't.
So those signs there, that if that is a fence and guardrail around a drainage pit, then there are 3 signs that are non-compliant and 1 sign that is compliant. Chris Pearce's sign is compliant. The 3 signs that are not compliant, they're not compliant because they're fixed to council infrastructure. This is an interesting one because I actually think that the signs that are attached to the fence there are safer than a frangible sign that's been stuck into the ground. But that's the rules. So Chris's sign is compliant and the other 3 are non-compliant. What am I going to do about it? I'm not going to do anything about it unless somebody makes a complaint. If somebody makes a complaint, we'll investigate it. And if they are found to be non-compliant, they'll be confiscated.
Yes, Stuart, you narc.
Please no one make a complaint now. I make that point because, again, the legislation, if you look at safety compared to what's legal and what's right, they're actually different, aren't they? And that's my point in here, is that those signs are actually in a good place, and it's good for democracy for people to see the signs, and they're out of the way. It's easier for mowing. It's less risk in rain and wind.
Yep.
So it is a situation that we make rules sometimes we don't necessarily think about the consequences, and that's not necessarily a criticism of you, Ken. I don't want you to come back next week and have to restate another issue.
See, look, the challenge is that, you know, after the election, you're so busy dealing with your new council that you don't sometimes have time to reflect on what worked and what didn't work. But I'm determined that after this election, we'll go back and visit the sign policy. I'm quite comfortable with those 3 signs that are currently non-compliant. And I don't want to take away from those 3 candidates. They're probably doing what every other candidate has done for the last 50 years, because we haven't actively enforce that requirement. And so my suggestion to council when we meet with the new council is, when we review the election signage, is that the election signage that's affixed to council infrastructure such as fences and guardrails should be allowed under our policy, because I think it is safer. And we'll see what happens, see what the council's views are on that.
And it's important for me to declare I have also had my sign up very much in that same situation, and I did personally zip tie it to that very fence many years ago. In fact, I've probably done it 3 times, and no one's ever confiscated my sign that I'm aware of.
All right, just want to give a quick mention to electronic signage. Robert Garland, he's the first one I've seen with electronic signage. Do we know many of the rules regarding electronic signage? If it's on private property, are we cool with it?
If it's on private property, I don't want to know about it.
Yep.
So to be clear, if it's a signage that belongs to like Taco or any other any other signage that is through a signage company that has billboards, they actually have to get approval from council. So the actual sign, the electronic sign, has gone through a council approval process, and anyone can then go to that company and ask for their advertising to be placed on that. And literally, I'm not trying to promote these billboard companies, but they can do it within usually 6 hours. You can put a sign up and it's gone for a period of time. The good thing about electronic signage is the cost is so much cheaper, because they don't have to print artwork and they don't have to send somebody out there to install it and uninstall it. It's done over the internet, and it's up in minutes.
And a trailer, you can basically tow around a trailer if you want, as long as that's registered with Queensland Transport.
As long as you comply with the Traffic Act.
Yep.
So, just to reiterate my position and the position of our administration, we do not want to be seen to be trying to influence election outcomes or perverting the democratic process. Our position with regards to signage is that we will take a light-handed approach. We're not actively enforcing signage. If we identify signage that is a public safety issue, we will confiscate it, and we will investigate any complaints that are made to us.
I think we've pretty much covered everything with signage. Hopefully you're still with us.
Macca, can I just thank Ken for coming in? It was very kind of him to firstly make a phone call and reach out to me, explain his position, and also to be accessible to us and the community. I think it shows tremendous integrity and the respect that he holds for our community. And Ken, thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Let's talk about the front runners, your picks for the week, Stu. Has anything moved, changed, or are you still the same?
So from my perspective, nothing's changed from last week. So the actual front runners are still Michelle Byrne, Phil Truscott, Paul Truscott, Daniel Sanderson, Michelle Govers, Robert Garland, Jan Heggie, Dennis Chapman, Sarah Farage and Rolf Light. And every week I'm changing between Michelle Govers and Michelle Govers, but they're the same person.
Okay, very nice. Thank you very much, Stuart. And we've got to let him go because there's a Pink concert coming up.
Yeah, again, this discrimination, this harassment because of and I'm not going to call it obsession. I wouldn't call it an obsession. Sometimes my wife does, but I don't. I think it's a healthy admiration for one of the greatest artists, female artists to live in my lifetime. High
praise for someone that doesn't deserve it. Okay. So we will catch you again, hopefully next week. That's getting cut, is it? Hopefully we'll catch you again next week. Shout out to Wuku.
And Pink. Love you, Pink.